Okay, welcome to Do You Panic, and this is video 2. If you remember from video 1, we had a framework which we're going to use now, and we're going to keep it as simple as possible. We're going to tell you what zone 3 is in detail and see if you can equate with that, and of course that's essential as we all want to recover from this dreadful affliction. So we are getting very much more into the nitty-gritty of it now. It will get possibly a little bit more personal, where I can give you examples, which of course I do on the website and also in the book, but obviously citing other people's problems and how they can manifest themselves. And the first thing we're going to talk about is zone 3 and how that's typified. Now, I have mentioned in the last video that zone 3 is typified by mind tensing and forcing. How is that characterized? Well, looking at the processes that are involved, when we spike, we have a tendency as intense people to have a very fast mind, and that isn't just a select few. The amount of people that I advise just shows me how many people do suffer from this, and it can be caused by pressures in life at certain times. It can be trauma. I do believe a lot of it is genetic as well, which can give you a baseline of intensity, but regardless, what we're interested in and should be interested in is how we actually recover and stop ourselves from feeling so destructive. And that's exactly what zone 3 can become, because it's consciously forced, even though the sufferer isn't aware of that. What can happen is, because they're consciously forcing something in their heads and it's tension, that means that the mind isn't free to move on. And as a result of that, we get stuck. And when things get stuck, if you imagine a river flowing and a dam stopping that flow, and that could be zone 2, but then building up and building up as we hold on to those building blocks, then the water builds up in terms of pressure, but we stop. And that water that's near the wall, if that's a thought we've had, which is a pressured thought, it becomes bigger. And obviously, then the stress builds up and we don't release that pressure. And that can lead to, obviously, aggressive outbursts. It can lead to repetitive behaviours, which are detailed quite a lot in my book, with advice column sections on conditions such as OCD, hand washing, checking, even perverse thoughts, anorexia. All of these extreme thoughts can manifest themselves from an uncomfortable thought or feeling. So again, this can become a very delicate subject to discuss, as we all have very intricate minds. And one feeling that can certainly ensue from jumping into zone 2 is a feeling of guilt, and a feeling of guilt for the thoughts that you have. Again, going into the nitty-gritty, I've had one advice column which was about an older lady who envisaged punching her grandchildren, and to a lot of people that may come across as being horrifying. Well, it can't be as horrifying as it was to her to actually have that feeling. And this just gives you an example of where panic can manifest itself and can expand and become everlasting and incredibly destructive. So again, I'm just trying to give you a flavour now of where we can go forward with these videos and really go in depth into very uncomfortable situations, but those situations are often discussed, and as a result, that can be the reason why so many people are internalising these problems, suffering in silence, and not really having a chance of recovery. I felt the same myself, and it's all down to having a very creative, fast, but sensitive mind. So if we go back to zone 3, which is obviously this zone here, one very important process to be aware of is that zone 3 is characterised by head talk. When we talk about the forcing process, what tends to happen is a fast mind often spikes with the stress that's caused by that, and then that leads to that natural cut-off, which is, it stands out because we're sort of like snapping out of a daydream. It's the same thing when the mind gets stressed and it starts to race, and we feel the tension. The mind cuts off, but it's quite a marked cut-off. Okay, it's a natural process, but it stands out. And as a result of that, we can be quite alarmed by it. And that alarm then leads to further mind racing in the form of head talk analysis. Struggling to spell it out. So, head talk analysis. This is the very subtle takeover, and if we actually understand it ourselves, it's going to be a case of having to experience it and acknowledge when it happens. This is just bringing it to the forefront of your minds so that you know that when you're tempted to panic, the thing to avoid doing is to move into that forced head talk. That's where we may be questioning, analysing. I refer to it in the book as analysis paralysis, and it happens because we're trying to control a thought that we've just come out of. We're trying to get clarity and complete understanding, which is again very understandable considering we're alarmed by the thoughts that we've had. So it's important to know that this is a very subtle process. Even though it's forced head talk, it's a very subtle process, and we can lurch into it as quickly as a split second. So, going back to this point about it being forced, the way I try to advise sufferers is that if you are at that stage where you feel tempted, because you've at that almost like brief stopping point when you spike about your thoughts and feel stressed, at that temptation point, this is trying to keep it as user friendly as possible, at that temptation point, it's then a case of not allowing yourself to force into head talk analysis. That's where you're trying to reason and ruminate. Slowly, as you take your foot off the pedal with that temptation, you will find that confidence builds. And this is when I refer to being able to return to zone 1, which is calmer, but not perfect. All that we're trying to achieve in these sessions is that you understand that flow isn't perfect, but issues aren't made of those experiences we have in life. And the important thing is, of course, in the early days, we'll have what I call a high propensity to react. And that is because we may self-doubt, we may feel guilt for what we think and feel, especially when it's very creative, if it's odd or mad and you think you're insane. The important thing to realise is at that temptation point to react, that you then don't lurch into that forced head talk. Again, this could happen, and what I do say to people is when they're been in the thick of panic for a long time, or if they're having a particularly bad time, bad day, a lot of stress is going on, is that you can find this happening, where we spike and then avoid the forced head talk, and then we may spike again, and then we avoid that temptation to force into head talk analysis, and that continues and can continue for quite a period of time. And it is a case of sticking at that and making sure that you know that if you do engage with that head talk analysis, you'll get stuck and you won't continue to flow. And those thoughts that you're having that are stressful will build up. And just like the example I used of if somebody advises you to relax and you spike because you feel stressed, and then you answer that with the word relax, that's part of the head talk analysis. And then that can become repetitive as part of that head talk analysis because you're stuck. And when we talk later on in further videos about obsessive behaviours, addictions, this isn't trying to wipe the slate with every condition, but it's trying to give a framework so that people can try it themselves and make their own minds up about it. But the success that has been achieved with this has been based on people understanding that time themselves. I can't do it for you. It is a case of recognising that you're at that temptation to push further into that head talk and to reason and analyse what's going on, and it just becomes a vicious cycle, a mind racing vicious cycle. So I hope that makes some sense. What we will do as videos start to come through now is respond to your questions. If you have any questions, you can email me. If you look at my website, doyoupanic.co.uk. Please don't forget to share this if you think it helps you or may help others. Subscribe to the page and get notifications when the next video is going to come online. And please just stick with it, because there's every faith in the success of this based on reasoning. It certainly doesn't mean life's going to be perfect, but far better. And actually, if it's momentary, far happier. Bye.